Welcome to the EBPowerCon session, Robotics and Augmented Humans. They're here right now with Eric Hollister, Senior Director of Marketing for Hilti North America's Electric Tools and Accessories. Construction robots and worker augmentation are no longer a thing of science fiction. Hilti recently unveiled the Jaibot semi-automated construction robot, which is designed for overhead drilling applications, as well as the wearable exoskeleton XO01, which is worn by the user to provide relief for physically demanding overhead tasks. Eric holds an electrical engineering degree and an MBA and has over 15 years of experience in industrial marketing and sales, focused on delivering innovation in construction solutions and automation to the market. We discuss the evolution of these robotics and augmentations for the job site and why they're not just the next shiny thing for construction, but rather a necessity because of labor shortages and the need to rebrand the construction sector as a whole. And joining me now at EB PowerCon is Eric Hollister. Eric, thanks for joining me and for taking the time.
Morning, Anthony. Really appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you, and I'm happy to be here this morning.
Now, Eric, I've been quite keen on connecting with you and having a more in-depth conversation with you since several months ago now. Ran some news items about some really exciting things that had come to market from Hilti. One of them being the JBot drilling robot, and the other one being the exoskeleton. And I'm probably going to say this wrong, but is it the XO01?
That is actually 100% correct.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Because I think I've been mistyping it, but anyway, the XO01. But before we get to those two things, because that's where I want to spend a little bit more time, why don't you take us back a little bit? Just give us a little bit of a sense of who, what Hilti is, kind of where its roots were, how it started, to where we are today.
Happy to, Anthony. I mean, for those that aren't familiar with Hilti, Hilti is a global leader in construction fastening technology and demolition products, primarily, at least two core roots of where the industry started. We're a global company based out of Sean Liechtenstein with about 30,000 people around the globe. So really broadly dispersed, and we've grown quite a bit in our history. I think in terms of background, Hilti is a privately owned company, still held 100% by the Hilti Trust today. And this year marks actually 2021, our 80th year in business. So we actually got started in a very, very small either garage or machine shop with both Martin and Eugene Hilti in Liechtenstein. Uh, and they started the Hilti business, like I said, as a mechanical fab shop, moving then in after the war into more consumer goods, and then actually acquired or developed the first low velocity powder actuated technology, which was their entry into the construction world. That was I think if I'm not mistaken, the DX100 way back in the day. They added on to that very shortly afterwards, entering into the call it combination uh, concrete drill space, bringing the TE line to market. And that was kind of how we have grown over the years through what we call powder actuated DX or the TE lines in the construction world. From there, we've expanded, as you have mentioned, quite dramatically across the tools and equipment world, as well as expanding well beyond powder actuated nails in the fastening and fire protection range.
And now we get to the present day where I consider we've got some real transformational technologies, not just the status quo, if you will. And here's where I want to get into to JBot and the XO01 exoskeleton. Why don't we tackle the JBot first? So what led Hilti down the path, got them thinking about, we need to start revolutionizing the construction site with robotics, with smart robotics.
It's a big question, first of all, Anthony, but a good question. If you look at how Hilti has grown in the industry, we've focused very heavily on trying to find areas where we could innovate and provide differentiated value to help, especially the workers on the job site, be more productive in the applications they're in and also be safer and more healthier in how they work. You can see that through a lot of the things we've developed over the years. And I think that's also that mindset is what led us both into exoskeletons as well as into JBot. Now, JBot in particular, or construction robotics, if I have to look back, I think it was a natural evolution of the technology we've been investing in over the years. Hilti entered into, call it the digital layout space, quite a while ago now, really working to try and help contractors digitize job site execution. No longer simply just laying out control points, but also now laying out build points across the job site. So first point was accuracy in terms of the build. And the next step, if you're really trying to look at how do we make that construction productive, is saying, okay, we now have the accuracy and the quickness of the layout. How do we improve the worker's ability to leverage that point? And if you look at, so JBot in particular, just stepping back a second, it's developed for one of a very strenuous application in terms of overhead drilling, right? This is a topic, especially across the mechanical, electrical world, that is uh, strenuous or challenging at least, right? When you're up on a ladder all day long or a scissors lift, pushing overhead, drilling holes in, and then coming down, moving the ladder, stepping back up and reinstalling, it's a fairly challenging process. And what we saw with JBot in particular is an opportunity to introduce and automate part of the process doing two things: helping speed up the call it the more challenging portion of that application in terms of drilling, and also helping protect the workers by bringing them down off the ladders in terms of drilling, and allowing them to focus on more value added applications like the install, the prep, and those kind of things, while JBot does the overhead drilling in parallel. So I think I see it as a little bit of a natural evolution of moving towards robotics, but really focusing on automating a portion of the application where the worker can still work in collaboration with that robot. So where we're helping the worker as opposed to trying to just take over an application.
Right, you mentioned that partnership, that robot is there to help, and I remember David Burzik was saying that they kind of refer to these things more as cobots as opposed to robots, because they are there to cooperate, to help and assist, and not push people off the job site or out of their careers.
Absolutely, and I'm actually glad you brought up that topic. My background stems out of the manufacturing and automation world, and the technology of robots has been in place there for decades, right? And if you talk about why is it taken so long for that to transition into the construction world, the construction compared to a static, fixed manufacturing space is massively dynamic. And the other piece is you've got workers everywhere. And so the concept of cobots and the ability of robots to safely work in parallel or in tandem with the workers, for me, it was a cost of entry before you could actually start to apply robotics into construction. So I think that is absolutely important, is we have to be able to assist the workers on the job site with robotics as opposed to locking down the space. You just can't do that. Construction is too fast paced, too dynamic in nature to be able to set up kind of a static manufacturing zone in the building.
Or organized chaos.
I that's a good ways to put it. And then the great news is with the technology that's emerging, it's becoming more and more organized chaos.
The more we can organize that chaos, the better. Maybe, Eric, you can just so I have a clearer picture in my mind, maybe just kind of quickly tell me how does this robot work? How does JBot work? How does it come out of the box? What does one do to it? How does it operate?
That's good. In terms of the principle, it's a semi-automated robot. And what that means is it's not 100% automatic running on its own. It has a wireless controller. So you have an operator that's working with the operator. And that's what brings part of the safety as well, right? You have somebody driving the robot to make sure that it is positioned correctly and to make sure that you can also monitor the area around it. So how do you get it out of the box? It all comes in its own nice self-contained container, and basically the operator drives it out with remote control, drives it into the location where you're going to be working. If you think about an operator up on a scissor lift or up on a ladder, to get to the same radius of holes, you're going to be up the ladder, down the ladder, move the ladder, up the ladder, down the ladder, move the ladder. It's if you talk about the benefit to the worker and really bringing them down off the ladder, it's quickly apparent when you put the JBot in this place.
Well, when I saw that thing, it made me think back to many years ago when I was putting in hangers for well, hanging suspended ceilings, the T-bar ceilings, and I'm just like, oh, I wish I had a J-bot back then. But now moving on to the exoskeleton, and this one also really excites me because it's cool tech, and let's face it, construction, being a journeyman, it can be grueling. It can be grueling on the body. Uh, so when I see things that can help someone execute their tasks and perhaps not be completely broken at the end of the day or at the end of their career, it excites me. So tell me how the exoskeleton came about.
I mean, you hit on it right away, Anthony. If you look at what has been one of the biggest trends or topics of conversation in the industry over the last few years is quite literally finding enough people that are skilled in doing the job to be able to keep everybody going. I mean, it's good on the one piece. It means that we have work and we're a driving industry that's growing. That's phenomenal. But we also know there's a challenge attracting new talent to the industry, and we're facing a bit of a generational gap. And so as we started to look at Hilti for different areas where we could innovate and really help, as I mentioned up front, bring value to the worker on the job site and performing the application, um, exoskeletons came out as, call it, the next step as we were looking at worker assist, or we call it human augmentation internal to Hilti. And I say that because exoskeletons are the most immediate piece to come out. But if you look at it, we look at the types of assists and augmentation opportunities on a spectrum. You've got everything from entry level, call it assists and carts to really take a little bit of the weight off the worker while they're doing things like floor breaking, for example, or pull tools to help you reach overhead without having to extend yourself. You're going to see technology like fixed assists and different kinds of counterbalances that you can use in the market. They're already out there today to really help make an application a little bit easier. We get into exoskeletons, I think, is really the wearable side of things, which makes it really interesting, all the way up to robotics, where you could start to take people out of the more dangerous or strenuous parts of the application. Um, Exoskeletons for us, once again, if we look at overhead drilling, for example, over time, you mentioned it, it's not easy work. And if you're really looking to have a career in construction and that's what you're doing, you go home tired at the end of the day. And you go home tired too many days in a row, that starts to hurt. And so I think exoskeletons for us was a natural fit, an area where we could bring in a piece of equipment that would help make the application more productive. But secondarily, from a Hilti perspective, I also think that with our direct model in terms of direct relationships with the customers, we're uniquely positioned inside of the industry to help the industry adopt the technology. And the reason I say that is a twofold. When we talk to people around the industry about exoskeletons and wearable assists, I see two opinions. There's a massive interest in finding the technology that can help the existing labor pool continue to work healthier and happier and continuing career. There's still a question: are exoskeletons ready? And if you look at technology in the construction industry, perception drives adoption. We've been doing it this way for a millennia or two, and the question is, if we're going to change, is it really there and really worthwhile? And I think or not, I think what I've seen with our direct model, what we're able to do is two things. We're first of all able to provide direct support on the job site, and that has become for the wearables critical. And why do I say that? At the end of the day, have you ever worn a camping backpack by any chance, Anthony?
I have, but I typically relied on the trunk of my car because when I've gone camping, I bring the barbecue, I I bring tarps, I bring everything.
Well, then maybe I'll use something a little bit more construction relevant. Everybody that we're going to be talking to at one point or another had to wear a tool belt for the first time. First time you put on a tool belt, it was awkward. It was a heavy, thick belt that had all these pockets and all these tools on it. And you inevitably, the first time you put it on, you had something behind your back you couldn't get to, or it was cockeyed and not quite fitting correctly. And after a while, it started to rub on your hips. But after you fiddled with it, dialed it in, got it to fit correctly, it became part of you. You could no longer function without it, basically, because everything was right where it needed. It was comfortable. You could work all day in it, and it became part of how you did your job. Exoskeletons, they're very similar. They're a wearable. When you first put them on, they're an additional piece of equipment. Now, if you get the fit right, then you cease to notice it very, very quickly. And the exoskeleton moves from being an additional piece of equipment to one that is really taking away some of the burden of what you're doing. And I think maybe that's a good point for me to mention. Exoskeletons, we break into two different categories: passive or assist exoskeletons, and powered or active. I think it's important for everybody to understand when we're talking exoskeletons, at least with the Exo 01, this is a passive assist exoskeleton. So it's mechanical in nature. There's no powered parts. It What it does is help relieve some of the fatigue, some of the burden of lifting and holding things overhead. Uh, the piece we most often get when we talk about exoskeletons is people's minds first go, "Oh, Iron Man, cool." This is not intended to help you lift 600 pounds in a single individual. But having a passive system, what we enable is removing some of that fatigue and making it very flexible, lightweight, so that it does disappear as long as you have the fit correct. And that's one piece that, in terms of driving the perception of technology, the people that are wearing it have to be happy and have to see the benefits to help the industry adopt the technology to the benefit of everybody. So that's the one piece where I think our direct model really, really helps. The other piece is attached is, in order for it to be beneficial, you have to be wearing it in the right application. It's meant for overhead drilling and overhead applications. If you're using it trying to expect that it's going to help you and assist in picking up boxes or bend over and pick things over the ground, it's probably going to end up being just another piece of equipment.
You brought up some excellent points there, and I love the comparison you make with the tool belt, because yeah, when you first strap that thing on, I know my problem was it was always pulling my pants down, with the weight of the hammers and screws and everything.
Yep.
But when you get that fit right, maybe it involves adding a few more holes or something to that belt and getting it just right. Now you're right, it does become part of you, and you can't feel yourself functioning properly on the job site without these things around you.
It's great for Hilti if we can put it in the right application and the right fit. But if you look at how we move the industry forward, there's a lot of technology that's becoming available to us as an industry for the first time, really robust and available. And as an industry, I would stress this again. If we as a group can find the right way to drive the right use and perception of these technologies, then we'll be able to adopt quickly. If not, we've all seen technology placed in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if you get the teams on the job site to the point where they're not happy with it, we also know that can kick it down the road 3 4 years, which then puts us behind as an industry. Yeah, Anthony, I think one of the biggest things that we have to monitor closely as we move forward, right? The challenge of labor in the industry is an ongoing challenge for all of us. I think across every trade I've spoken to, looking forward at the jobs that we'll need versus the skilled labor that's in place today, there's a gap. And I think, the technology that we are talking about today does two things for us. It, number one, helps us protect the valuable workers that we have today, right? In terms of making their job a little bit easier, making them more comfortable as they go home at the end of the night. That will protect the investment that we have in our most valuable resources, the people that know how to do the job today. I think there's a side effect to that though too that will help us even more. As we look at that gap in terms of labor demand versus the pool that we have, bringing technology into construction will help us rebrand the industry a bit, making it sexier for the next generation, right? There's a whole group of people out there that are looking for things to do that may have a perception of construction as being hard, dirty, antiquated, etc. We've got a chance with everything coming up to leverage the technology as we rebrand the industry to attract new talent and help us fill those gaps in terms of the jobs that we have available.
Excellent. I'm so glad you made that point and that you weren't shy to actually want the industry to be sexy so as to attract the next generation.
It's fun, right? I mean, we are building things. It should be sexy. It should be fun. You get to see exactly the fruits of your labor. So I think, everybody in the industry sees that, but everybody recognizes we've also got a little bit of a stigma as an industry that we can overcome, I think, by leveraging technology with the next generation.
No, there's definitely, I mean, beyond the paycheck, there is definitely a pride that comes with being able to look back and say, we built this. And uh, I'm sure construction is not unique, but I think it's probably kind of top of list in terms of jobs that will give you that satisfaction.
Absolutely, Anthony. I mean, talk to anybody who's been part of a big project called a 100-story building or a big plant who doesn't drive by that building and point out to their family, I built that. I stood on the 80th floor when I did XYZ. And there's absolutely a pride in it internally. And I think it's just knocking down those barriers and enabling the next generation to see it. And we can leverage tech to really start to build that, I think.
You've been in the industry some 15 years, and you had also confessed, admitted, I don't know what the right word is, that you do have a background as an engineer, which surprised me because I can understand you and you speak quite clearly. But
Thanks.
so you've been around long enough to see things. So what sort of transformational changes have you witnessed or excited you over these last 15 years or so in the industry?
Anthony, maybe just a slight twist to what you said. 15 years in terms of industrial, absolutely. I think the interesting piece, though, that I can take your question run with is that time's been split between, call it the manufacturing sector and construction. But it hits right at the core of your question because when I first was starting out in career, to be honest, it was right about the time when two things were happening in manufacturing. Number one, wireless connectivity, the ability to grab data from anywhere in the plant to your laptop and be able to control and react was just taking off at that point, and that was blowing people's minds. It was really entertaining to watch. And the other piece was quite literally thinking back, trying to figure out how do we enable operators to interact with robots at that time in manufacturing. And if you look at all the stats out there, you know, construction has actually lagged behind in terms of tech adoption and productivity over those last 15, 20 years dramatically. And for a number of reasons, right? One was business was booming. We had their way of doing things. Two was the tech probably wasn't 100% ready. The good news is now shift forward to the second half of my career, and we're at a point where both of those technologies are ready to help shift how the industry in construction does things. And I think those two pieces, as I thought back through, made the biggest impression on my life in manufacturing, but also I'm excited to see what both of those can do moving forward. And, if you look at the wireless connectivity, the job sites are a really dynamic place. The ability to monitor what's going on the job site and react or course correct is invaluable to us as an industry, because what does that do, right? Our biggest challenges we have is we're building, 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 and then we recognize something may have been built wrong, or it clashes with something else, or it's taking us longer or more material to build for whatever reasons, right? There's all kinds of waste in the building process that having real-time data consolidated from the job site would be dramatically helpful for. I mean, we could start to look at monitoring real-time material labor flow against what we'd planned in the industry. to identify problem areas before they happen and get ahead of it. That could help us, right, reduce rework, shorten scheduling times, or at least understand when we're going to run into a bump in the road that would extend it. Uh,
And margins are tight as they are. So any leg up that a trade or sub trade can get, I mean, all the better.
it's a leg up from a margin perspective, absolutely. But if you look through the whole value chain, from the sub trade through the GC all the way to the owner operator, pulling real time data from the job site and enabling us to course correct, let me rephrase, plan and course correct is better for everybody, not just in the fact that it can help us protect the margins throughout the value chain, but it should, at the end of the day, also allow us to provide a better quality product that is better documented for later use and maintenance and adjustment, um, in a shorter amount of time. And so I think that data and wireless connectivity on the job site is going to be a big mover for us. And I think the other piece that I mentioned from the manufacturing side that dials right into that is cobots or collaborative robots. The ability to take some of the biggest chances for error in the building process in terms of, say you're 3/8 of an inch off of where you need to be lined up for one hole, multiply that times 1,500 inside of a single mechanical room, right? That's a big opportunity for challenges. And if you can tackle that and through the digital translation of the planning into construction through digital layout or the JBot, for example, you can start to guarantee that that's going to be a quicker installation as well as a more accurate installation.
Well, to that end, and I'll close off with this last question, and this isn't necessarily specific to Hilti, but if you had to pull out the crystal ball in terms of what we have now, what sort of things do you see coming down the pipe in the months and years ahead, or would like to see in the months and years ahead?
Um, that's a good question. I think the what I expect to see in terms of two of the biggest drivers of the industry, and I think everybody's coming together on these points, are extension of what I just talked through. As sensor technology becomes smaller, cheaper, it's inevitably going to be built into everything that we work with. And what that does, that will enable the data that will give us real-time feedback from the job site across the job. So I expect them and am looking forward to that transition where we can now start to really see in real time how the work is progressing. What does production look like, right? Where are the assets? Who's using them? Where are the bottlenecks that we're seeing as material, people, and work flows throughout the job site? As the job site becomes smarter and smarter through technology, that should give us exponential gains in terms of how we can plan and build, avoiding mistakes, shortening timelines, and protecting margins. So that piece I'm excited about. Um, the other piece is how we continue to automate the job site. And I say that not just because we just launched JBot. I mean, that's clearly top of mind for me. But if you look, we're not the only ones. There's a lot of work out there around trying to find areas where it makes sense, where it adds value to bring automation to the job site. And if you look at all the challenges that we've had over the past year, 2020 was a really challenging year for everybody. Not only did everything slam to a halt with COVID, but we also all had to figure out, how do we continue? How do we work? How do we build while maintaining safe distances, while working with constrained number of people on a job site? I think 2020, the silver lining that'll come out of it is it's allowed us as an industry to refocus on technology and solutions that can help individual workers perform tasks by themselves in a safe and productive manner, as well as technology on how do we manage that flow of goods and people around the job site to protect everybody. And I think with that, you'll see robotics and maybe more importantly, semi-automated systems start to become more prevalent on the job site as we help workers stand alone in individual applications, and avoid some of the waste in terms of individuals who, were there just as support watching those kind of things.
You've definitely given me and the audience so much more to chew on. Initially this started with let's talk about JBot, let's talk about augmented humans, and see where the conversation goes from there. And from my perspective, I'm very pleased to report it's gone all kinds of places and given me all kinds of excellent things to think about and to look forward to. Uh, Eric, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know where you are. It's an early morning, but you've risen to the challenge. So I thank you for that.
Anthony, I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm happy to get a chance to talk to you today. And no worries about the early morning. I've been well fed with caffeine, so I'll be good for the rest of the morning as well. But
Very good. Thanks again, Eric.
thanks, Anthony. It's been great chatting with you.